Hello, welcome to part two of the lecture History of Religion in China. We're going to pick up with popular and folk religion in this last installment. I'd finished the previous section with the very first passage of the Analects, which is what I gave you to read to accompany these lectures. And I feel like you might be thinking, but what makes Confucianism a religion? Then these seem like relatively mundane principles. It seems like more of a system of maybe morality than religion. And that's it's a good insight to have. But consider, a bit of a shift in your perception. Typically, when we think about religion, we think of sacred activities, right? Going to a certain place at a certain time and doing a certain thing. I mean, these are the makings of religion are putting yourself into religious spaces, whether it's a physical space or a mental space. But for Confucianism, it's sort of turned around. What if we could make everything we do sacred? What if everyday life is something to be celebrated with the same reverence that we have for these incredibly special parts of our lives, right? What if we could treat every day like the day we get married, or the day that we have our first child, or the day that we meet our best friend, right? These incredibly meaningful days, right? The day that we celebrate our parents' birthday. What if we were to try to make our actions as meaningful every day? This is the making of Confucian religion, and it also has a counterpart in popular and folk religion, which we will discuss in this lecture. So, for all of China's recorded history, there has been a consistent and developing set of religious practices among elite and non elite people alike. So, it deserves to be said that sometimes when we say popular or folk, we mean common people, right? We mean the hoi polloi. But in the Chinese tradition, this is everyone. Even people who identified as Buddhists or Taoists or Confucians would also perform, and still do, popular or folk religious aspects, rituals. The practices represent a combination of Taoist, Confucian, as well as Buddhist beliefs. It's interesting, I think, that over China's long history, the walls between these religions weren't always kept that stable. The practices bled from one to the other. Even with the advent, the importing of Buddhism, right, back in the first and second century of the current era, Confucianism and Taoism immediately began to change to accommodate Buddhist beliefs and practices, and we've seen that all through China's history. A big part of popular and folk religion is recognizing auspicious days of the lunar cycle. These include, of course, Chinese New Year, as well as the Dragon Boat Festival. And there are specific rituals in the preparation of traditional foods. This is the most public display of popular and folk religion. There are also rituals on certain days or every day at family altars throughout the year for recognizing and sacrificing to ancestors in order to bring good fortune. I've included this picture here of a Chinese New Year celebration in Taiwan. And I think it's notable that even in contemporary China, the recognition of these holidays, which correspond to ancient rituals, right? They have something to do with the planting of the fields and the harvesting of the fields, and recognizing that at certain times of year humans need to do certain things. And these folk religion holidays are still marking that time, even today. Pictured here is one of the many deities in the mostly Taoist religious pantheon, Matsu, which she is the sea goddess in Taiwan. She's also the Jade Empress, the wife of the Jade Emperor, who I'll discuss later. You'll notice on her float here, her stage, the character Fu. And if you see door hangings on Chinese New Year, they typically have this character. It means good fortune or good luck. And the idea is we should strive both on these special days, but also in everyday life, to do behaviors that placate or entice the activities of the gods and deities, as well as the ancestors, to promote good fortune, to bring good fortune for us. Chinese popular religion is characterized by this recognizing and sacrificing to one's own ancestors, as well as the deities in the vast pantheon, which, by some counts, can number into the thousands of Taoist gods. There are also some everyday rituals recognized by popular religion. One of them is recognizing Zhao Jun, the kitchen god. So typically, the ritual is every year a family hangs a picture, a paper portrait of Zhao Jun, and sometimes Zhao Jun and his wife, above the stove. And at the end of the year, it's burned and replaced by a new one. Sometimes the picture itself will be smeared with honey across the mouth before it's burned, because that burning sends off Zhao Jun, who submits a report of your daily household activities, whether you've been, good or bad, directly to the Jade Emperor, the highest god in the Chinese pantheon. The honey is meant to sweeten his words, because if a good message is delivered, then the highest emperor in the Taoist pantheon, in the Chinese popular religious pantheon, will send good fortune. The Jade Emperor is the highest, the most powerful being in the cosmos. You could think of it in terms of the Jade Emperor sort of supplanted through time, came to replace Shangdi, right? So in the same way, we don't have direct access to the Jade Emperor. We depend on mediators, like the kitchen god. But the Jade Emperor does control all aspects of our lives, or creates the conditions for success, or creates the conditions for catastrophe, right? The Jade Emperor controls the fate of humans by reward as well as punishment. Some say that the Jade Emperor is a newer instantiation of Lao Tzu himself. The Jade Emperor is all-powerful and immortal, but also extremely concerned about the everyday behavior of humans, right? So you see this element of Confucianism being wrapped in. If we talk about Chinese religious themes generally, we have a few of the same topics that we talked about in the first part of this lecture. Those who have died still have influence and power in the present. The appeal to Confucian ancestors, probably the most salient point to make, but also if we go back to the kitchen god was an actual person. If you go to the Wikipedia for the kitchen god, you'll see all the gruesome ways his story has been told, right? He's an actual person who died and then was granted a position in the Taoist pantheon. Most of the gods in the Taoist pantheon were once living people who've died. The second religious theme, one must draw from the authority of the past to justify oneself in the present. And this is especially important with Confucianism. Confucius himself saw himself as drawing behaviors from the past to apply to the modern day, to bring the harmony and order that was present in the past to right now. We could even say that the recognition of traditional Chinese holidays is also an appeal to the authority of the past where they figured out the timing, right? The timing of the harvest festival that would become the Chinese New Year, the timing of the harvest, right? The time of planting, the intricate schedule wherein one is to recognize certain gods on certain days. It's believed that if it's figured out in the past, why change it, right? If things have been consistently improved over time, there's no, incentive to reinvent the wheel. Third, the human world and the natural world are intertwined, right? We find that in Confucianism with the appeal that the human world, right, the social world, if it's harmonized, then all of nature should benefit. We can think of it as concentric circles, right, which means that think about if you throw a rock into a pond and it ripples out. There's a small circle and then larger and larger and larger circles extending outward. If we think of the human world as sort of a microcosm, if it can be brought into the right alignment, then the macrocosm benefits as well. And 4, the circumstances of the world are a result of cyclical patterns. Right? Confucianism, just as Taoism, believes that the forces that shape our world are, the influence of the I Ching, are predictable, are orderly. And if we want to know about the world, we should seek knowledge of the changes that shape it. So I got this list. This list also appeared in an earlier slide at the end of the first part, if you'd like to go and review it. All right, this brings us to the end. I hope you've enjoyed it, and please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you. Bye.